Hello everybody and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, the Lost Planeswalker. And today we have Yuma Proud Protector Precon Upgrade Guide. This is the third video of these Precon Upgrade Guide videos that I'm making. If you haven't checked out the other two, maybe check those out and stay tuned for the next one tomorrow. But Yuma Proud Protector is 5, red, green, white, legendary creature, human rogue. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each land card in your graveyard. Okay, that makes it much better. Whenever Yuma Proud Protector enters a battlefield or attacks, you may sack a land. If you do, draw a card. Got some Get Rog effects here. And whenever a desert card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, create a 4/2 green plant warrior creature token with reach. Yuma's a pretty unique commander. I mean, he plays around with deserts, which is very cool, and I have some things to say about the deserts they decided to include in this deck. But, yeah, this is a cool deck. I think we got some really cool cards, especially for these color combinations. But let's look at that co-commander real quick. We have Kiri, Talented Sprout, I believe. 1 red, green, and a white legendary creature plant druid. Other plants and tree folk you control get +2/+0. Okay, that's pretty nice. And at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, return target plant, tree folk, or land card from your graveyard to your hand. That's a cool effect. I like it. Definitely not as powerful as Yuma, I believe. You know, I think he's going to provide you a lot more value, so he's going to be the commander we stick with. But we got 9 new cards in this deck, excluding the commander. That's 10 in total. But let's start looking through those and see what some new cards we got are. So we have Angel of Indemnity, Cactus Preserve, and Cataclysmic Prospecting. So Angel of Indemnity, 5 and a white creature, angel warrior, flying and lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, return target permanent card with mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Okay, that seems pretty good, but the effect I like even more is this Encore ability. 6 white. If you don't know what Encore means, it means basically exile this card from your graveyard and you make a copy that attacks each opponent during combat. They get exiled or, something at the end of combat, but what I like even more is you get to get, 3 things with mana value 4 or less back from the graveyard. So I think that that's a really cool effect. Next is Cactus Preserve. This is a land desert with when it enters battlefield tapped. Tap it to add 1 mana of any type a land you control could produce. And 3, until end of turn, Cactus Preserve becomes an XX green plant creature token where X is its greatest mana value among your commanders. It is still a land. So that's pretty sick. I mean, obviously, with our commander in this deck who's 8 mana, you get a 8/8 plant creature. But really, this only works great with Yuma because Kiri here is kind of real small. So it's not as great. Cataclysmic Prospecting, X red sorcery. Cataclysmic Prospecting deals X damage to each creature. For each mana from a desert spent to cast this spell, create a tapped treasure token. That's a pretty cool card. I mean, I think obviously we're going to be full of deserts here, but this is a board wipe that is going to give us a ton of treasures to help cast our stuff afterwards, so I like it. Next up, we have Dune Chanter, Embrace the Unknown, and Kiri Talented Sprout. So Dune Chanter is 2 and a green creature plant druid with reach. Lands you control and land cards you own that aren't on the battlefield are deserts in addition to their other types. Lands you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color, and tap, mill 2 cards, you gain 1 life for each land milled this way. Dune Chanter does a lot for 3 mana, and I think it is a card you'll see in a lot of other decks. I see here it's already going for like $4, and it makes a lot of sense. Basically, letting you tap for anything is pretty powerful. Embrace the Unknown is 2 and a red sorcery. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. And this is Retrace. Really cool effect. And Kiri Talented Sprout we already talked about. So let's move on to those last 3 cards here with Rumbleweed, Sand Scout, and Vengeful Regrowth. So Rumbleweed here is 10 in a green creature plant elemental. This spell costs 1 less cast for each land card in your graveyard. This is Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. And when Rumbleweed enters battlefield, other creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain Trample until end of turn. Okay, so you're telling me that this could be for a single green. When it enters, other creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain Trample. In addition, you get this big 8/8 Vigilance, Reach, Trample creature, because I will take it. That seems very powerful. Another really cool, end of game, hey, I'm going to play this for, a little bit of mana, and my entire board is just going to swing out and win. Sand Scout here is 1 and a white creature, human scout. When Sand Scout enters battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for a desert, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. And whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, create a 1/1 red, green, and white sand warrior creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. That's what we're going to be doing, so this is a very cool effect in this deck. And Vengeful Regrowth is 4 green sorcery. Return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Tap, create that many 4/2 green plant warrior creature tokens with reach, and you can flashback for 6 green. This is okay. I think that this is particularly good in this deck, but I don't know if I'd put this card in some other decks. So I had a lot to add to this deck, and it was kind of hard for me to figure out what cards or strategies you're going to go with. You know, there's a lot of landfall effects. There's some, you know, just effects for playing lands or having lands leave the battlefield. So the cards I decided to cut is kind of a little bit less than I did for the other decks, and I have a lot more cards I think you should add. So, you know, just take what I have, and, you know, if you think, hey, that's cool, or no, I'm not doing that, I don't disagree. But before we talk about the cards I decided to cut from this deck, I just want to say, if you aren't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. If you would, it would just mean the world to me. And yeah, let's look at those cards. So Angel of Ruin, Decimate, and Genesis Hydra were the first cards I thought you should cut from this deck. Angel of Ruins is pretty good. 7 mana, artifact creature, angel, flying. When it enters, exile up to 2 target artifacts and/or enchantments. And this is plane cycling for 2 generic mana. It's a 5/7. It's big. It gets rid of stuff. Seems pretty good. My issue with it is you're probably going to want to be using it for this plane cycling, and there's only a couple of planes in this deck. So I really don't like that. You know, later in the game, maybe you're going to be doing some other stuff, but there's a lot of other big payoffs in this deck that I would rather be casting for 7 mana than this card. So I decided to cut it. Decimate is next. 2 red-green sorcery. Destroy target artifact, target creature, target enchantment, and target land. One of the main downsides of this card, I believe there's 2. 1, you have to have a target for all of these if you want to cast it. So if somebody doesn't have an enchantment or an artifact or a creature, you know, on the board, you know, this doesn't happen. But in addition, I believe if one of those targets gets removed first, I don't think any of these actually happen. It's a weird effect where, based on how the card is written, you know, you have all of these have to happen or none of them happen. So if somebody, you know, gets rid of their own thing, you know, maybe it saves the rest of the board. So Decimate's okay in some positions, but I didn't want to add it here. And Genesis Hydra, X green creature plant Hydra. When you cast a spell, reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put a non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield, then shuffle the rest into your library. Genesis Hydra enters battlefield with X plus counters on it. Kind of the same mentality of Angel of Ruin. There's some other really great payoffs that I'd rather be dumping all of my mana into than Genesis Hydra here. And the next 3 cards, which are the last 3 I think you should cut, are Perpetual Timepiece, Scare Tiller, and Wreck and Rebuild. So Perpetual Timepiece is 2 generic artifact. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then 2, exile this. Shuffle any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library. There isn't really any benefit here for us. I mean, you're milling some stuff, so maybe you're putting some lands in the bin, but there's so many other better ways to do it than this. And I don't really know what you want to shuffle in, because you don't want to shuffle your lands in. Maybe you want to put some creatures back in your deck. There's no way to search them, so this just didn't make any sense. Scare Tiller here is 4 generic artifact creature Scarecrow. Whenever it becomes tapped, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tap. Return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. This seems okay. It's just 4 generic mana for a 1/4 that is probably going to be attacking one time and die. I just wouldn't do it. 4 mana for this effect just doesn't seem good enough. In Wreck and Rebuild, 1 red and a green sorcery. Choose 1, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Mill 5 cards, then you may put a land from your graveyard onto the battlefield tap. Yeah, I mean, that second one, probably the better one. It's kind of versatile, but I don't know if I want to cast this the first time, and I definitely don't want to cast it for, you know, 5 mana later on. So, yeah, there's just better ways to do this that I'm going to get into. So, let's start looking at some of those cards I think you should include in this deck. I kind of have 2 categories of cards, and then I have all the deserts I want to talk about real quick. But the cards I think you should include, starting off, we have Aftermath Analyst, Crop Rotation, and Destructive Digger. So, the first thing I want to talk about is all these cards are going to revolve around you sacking your lands, because Yuma makes you a bunch of, you know, plants whenever a desert is put in your graveyard. So Aftermath Analyst is 1 in a green creature, elf detective. When it enters, mill 3 cards, then 3 in a green, sack it to return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This is great. You know, we're going to be sacking a bunch of things. We're going to get them all back with this. Or you milled a bunch of lands into your graveyard, just get them back this way. Crop Rotation, single green instant. As an additional cost, cast a spell, sack a land. Search your library for a land card, put on the battlefield, then shuffle. Crop Rotation is one of the best ramp cards ever. It doesn't seem like it, but it definitely is, because it gets you your best lands, and this works in a ton of decks to just get those lands you might need, because it gets any land. So sacking it, making some plants, getting an even better land on the battlefield. I like it. And Destructive Active Digger, 2 and a red, creature goblin with 3, tap, sack an artifact or land, draw a card. Yeah, just draw some more cards from, your lands. Next up, we have Devastating Summons, Knight of the Reliquary, and Scapeshift. Devastating Summons is a red for a sorcery that says, as an additional cost to cast this, sack X lands, put 2 XX red elemental creature tokens onto the battlefield. Okay, that seems pretty cool. It makes some big stuff for just sacking your lands. In the process, making a ton of plant creature tokens. This seems like the right call to me. This could be a game ender. Knight of the Reliquary is 1 green and a white creature, human knight. Knights of the Reliquary gets +1/+1 for each land card in your graveyard. Sack a forest or plains, search your library for a land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Just like crop rotation, this gets you your best thing, but in addition, it gets bigger for each land card in your graveyard, which is something we're going to be doing often, so great addition to this deck. And Scapeshift, 2 green sorcery, sacrifice any number of lands, search your library for up to that many land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Basically just replacing all of your lands and making a ton of creature tokens in the process for 4 mana is definitely worth it. And the last card, I think, here is Zern Orb, 0 mana artifact. Sack a land, gain 2 life. There's so many ways to get them back that, getting a ton of mana in the process seems pretty good. Pretty good to me. Now, the much more controversial set of cards here I'm going to talk about are blow up all the lands. This is a taboo effect in Magic decks, and I only bring these up in a separate category because I think they work really well with Yuma. We have Armageddon, Bend or Break, Boom and Bust, Fall of the Thran, and Ravages of War. All of these are just going to destroy all lands, which is a really big taboo, an unwritten rule in Commander. But I think you're going to win if you do this. You get to make a ton of plant creature tokens because this is just destroying lands. And then nobody can really do anything if they don't have any responses. You just win the next turn with, you got 10, lands. Destroy them all. Get 10 4/2s. And just win the game. I mean, I think this is a no-brainer to me. I think that these are especially good also if you get into a Kingmaker situation where you're one-on-one. Yeah, destroy all the lands. You can't do anything, and, I'm going to get all my lands back somehow, and that seems pretty powerful. So, lastly, what I want to talk about is they included a bunch of deserts in this deck, but they also left out a ton of them, which I was a little confused by because I'm like, well, if you're going to be playing deserts, shouldn't you be playing all the deserts? But what I found out is most of the deserts that they left out were colorless. So I want to bring them up here so that if you're deciding to build this deck, there's more deserts than they actually talk about. In addition, there's a couple that I think are really powerful that they didn't include that just came out in this set. So that was kind of surprising to me. So those deserts are Arid Archway, Bucolic Ranch, Cradle of the Accused, just Desert, Endless Sands, Grasping Dunes, Hostile Desert, Sandstorm Verge, Sunscorched Desert, and Survivors Encampment. I think there's particularly some really cool cards here. There's cards that tap for, more than just colorless mana as well, that I think are worth including because there is a fair number of basic lands in the deck. I think 17 in total, and that's just too many. That's probably over half the lands or close to half the lands in this deck, and I really want to be casting and getting rid of deserts to activate my commander's ability. So I would swap out a number of those, but just be careful because it can be hard if you replace too many of your lands, with generic lands, and you're not maybe going to get all of the colors of mana you need right away. So you might be more willing to mulligan more freely if you include more of these deserts in the deck. But if you want to see the rest of this deck, it's in the description down below. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Comment down below what you think. Is there additional cards in this deck you just think are, these are just bad? You should remove them. I felt like there was a lot of really cool cards in this deck, so I didn't really want to cut too many because it really depends on the strategy you're going at. There's a lot of returning lands from your graveyard. There's a lot of landfall. There's a lot of good stuff. So I thought that this was a cool effect for this deck. But in addition, if you consider leaving a like, sharing this with a friend, and subscribing, that would mean the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And today's Scryfall card of the day is Leeching Sliver. Seeing one slowly devour one of my party begged the question, do they know what cruelty is? *Thurian Scout. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.